Hi, everybody. Welcome to this edition of SB Council's Small Business Insider Live. Small Business Insider Live is a live stream program specifically geared for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and anyone interested in small business policy. I'm Christy Arslan, and I am SB Council's Entrepreneur in Residence. I'm also a small business owner located here in Alexandria, Virginia. And I have here today joining me Ray Keating, who is SB Council's Chief Economist. Hi, Ray. How are you?
Good. How are you, Christy?
Good. As I mentioned, it's a busy day here in Washington, D.C., and we're going to try and focus our discussion today, even though a lot of people are focused on other things, on energy and infrastructure, which are two critically important sectors and also sectors that have the most opportunity for small business right now. And so last week, there was big news about President Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement, and also this week, the White House is having a big focus on what they call Infrastructure Week, in which they're working to highlight policies that focus on helping improve and modernize our infrastructure. So I'd love to kick things off in getting your analysis on the energy and infrastructure sectors and what have been some of the roadblocks to both improvement and modernization.
Sure. Energy's been a fascinating sector for over 10 years now. It was actually, since the economy's been underperforming so long, I actually love talking about energy because that's one of the clear areas where growth has been quite strong. Investment's been strong. We went from we were going to be dependent on foreign sources of energy forever, and now we're the leading producer of oil and natural gas on the planet. So that's quite a transformation, and it all came about, we're talking about infrastructure, it all came about via private sector investment in, technology, technological advancements, and also in infrastructure. So that's been, the good news story for the economy for very long. There are ups and downs, of course, along the way. But right now, when you look ahead, there are a lot of exciting things going on the energy front in terms of both onshore and offshore, shale investments. So there's a lot going on there. I think the EIA came the other day and said the U.S. will have record oil production in 2018. That's what they're projecting. So that's all good news. There's infrastructure related to that, right? Oil and natural gas, you got to move it. You got to get it to market. So, right out of the box, the Trump administration did the right thing by essentially reversing the Obama administration on the Keystone XL pipeline and also the Dakota Access pipeline. So those are private sector, solid infrastructure efforts that will make a real difference to our economy. Then you've got, the other side of the rest of, or not the rest, but another part of the infrastructure story. The president emphasized waterways while he was in Ohio. There are a lot of talk about highways and so on. That part of infrastructure where government's directly involved, you've got to kind of pull it all apart and figure out what's legitimate, what's not. We all know the stories of bridges to nowhere. And remember when we talked about shovel-ready projects and we had problems there. But again, I think the emphasis that the Trump administration is putting on it so far, I think is generally positive. They've been emphasizing the private investment end of things. There are a lot of examples where the private sector can step into what people normally think is a purely government undertaking, like highways and so on, where the private sector can come in and make investments, and it has made investments and had good results. So those, I think, are some of the big headline issues in it. But infrastructure is important as a way to what can I say? Follow economic growth. Some of my economist friends like to say, well, if the government pours concrete, that'll create economic growth. Well, you have to have a purpose to it, right? And when government does it best is when they follow what's going on in the private sector. So, like I said before, with the energy sector, we've got oil and natural gas that we're producing in North Dakota. We have to move that. So that's, infrastructure following things that are going on in the economy. So there's a lot of exciting things going on. We just have to be sure that when government's going down this route, that we sort out the legitimate projects from, those political wants that maybe aren't necessary.
Well, obviously, for small business, it's good news that there's going to focus on private investment that would lead to a lot of opportunities. So let's first talk about energy a bit. And obviously, in light of the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, what do you think are important things to do, or important next steps to help cultivate opportunity for small business in the energy sector?
Yeah, well, I think making, again, having the market lead us is the right way to go. So getting away from government picking and choosing winners and losers, the ideal scenario is for government policy at the federal level and all the way down to the state and local is equal treatment. Let's have smart regulation, limited regulation, right? We're going to need some regulation where we protect the environment and so on. And we've done actually a very good job of that, I think, so far. The states have done a great job for the most part when it comes down to fracking, for example, hydraulic fracturing and so on. So I think, again, it's get the treat each sector equally. Mm-hmm. Don't favor one over the other. Don't start picking, as I said, winners and losers and providing subsidies to some while trying to tax and regulate others, and let the market work. And I think that's what we saw. Well, what we saw with energy in terms of natural gas and oil is the private sector overcoming some overt hostility during the Obama administration. So that was quite an accomplishment. The small business angle here, to bring it back to that, is really quite robust in the sense that a lot of people think of, energy, big oil, big energy, and so on. But when you look at each sector, each energy sector, they're overwhelmingly populated by small and mid-sized businesses. Oil and gas extraction, 90% of those firms have less than 20 workers. Operational firms, 81% have less than 20 workers. We're talking about infrastructure, oil and gas pipelines, and related construction projects. That industry is very much a small business industry. Almost 60% have less than 20 employees, and about, I think it's 84% have less than 100. So these are sectors that are very much very much about small business. And then obviously on the other side of it, when we see the increased production, we see those infrastructure investments, and what that means for getting products to market. That's good news for small businesses as consumers, right? We all use energy. So if we're able to get a secure supply and lower prices, that obviously benefits small businesses across the board.
Sure. Now, there's obviously a lot of growth opportunity and a big focus for this administration, and I think for many Americans, has been the economy. And these two sectors, energy and infrastructure, seem to have significant growth opportunity that could benefit the economy. So if we have our policymakers work to minimize the regulatory burden in these two sectors, and then also create any necessary incentives, meaning maybe encouragement of private investment in both these sectors, what do you think the impact will be on our economy? We've been tracking, you and I have been talking about watching the jobs numbers and looking at GDP and whatnot. So what if we can get these two, in particular, stimulate growth within these two sectors, what do you think the impact will be on our U.S. economy?
Oh, we do it right. The impact's obviously a positive. It's a matter of, which study do you want to pick in terms of the number of jobs that are going to be created, the additional investment, the additional economic growth, the income growth. We're not just talking about, when you look at these sectors, energy, infrastructure in general, these tend to be high-paying jobs. So if we're producing those, that's good news for the issues that we have in terms of salaries and wages and so on. So I think that as long as we get those policies right, it's an unequivocal plus for the economy across the board. Breaking out of that, what you and I have talked about, this underperforming recovery where we're 2.1% growth and on average, and obviously the last quarter was far worse than that. So it's a plus for the economy. And the other thing that I want to bring into this is, we're talking about energy. We talked a little bit, about infrastructure in the sense of waterways, and the waterways issue is very interesting. The Wall Street Journal had a great article on this in terms of the lack of investment and upkeep that we've had in terms of locks and so on and so on. And that's critical for so many sectors, primarily agriculture, farmers getting their goods to market. So again, if we do it right, we can see some real benefits throughout the economy. The other thing that I want to mention, another sector that people often, I think, overlook when we talk about infrastructure is telecommunications. When you look at the enormous private sector investment that's been going on in terms of wired and wireless broadband, that's been fantastic for you and I to be able to do this, right? For businesses to be able to reach out to their customers locally and around the world. We all know the wonders of the wonderful benefits of the internet in terms of our businesses. So that's been fantastic. There's some good things going on at the FCC in terms of rolling back some misguided regulation that could serve as a disincentive for further investment. So that's been a positive development over Chairman under Jeet Pai, the new chairman of the FCC. And when you look a little bit down the road, well, first off, we don't know what's coming next. That's what's exciting about the industry in a certain sense. But there are, 5G wireless networks. That's what we're looking at next in terms of that being rolled out. And as long as the federal government doesn't provide any disincentives, right, steps back and does what it's been doing for a long time wisely, a light regulatory touch, and as long as state and local governments don't get in the way with onerous permitting and regulations and fees, that could be that will be the next step, the next revolution on the telecom front, and some very exciting developments for small businesses and consumers and so on. So infrastructure covers a lot of areas that I don't think people are fully aware of, or they don't think,
No, you're correct. And telecom is a perfect example where we've seen so much growth and, all of that infrastructure having to be built in terms of, all of the wires and satellites that help allow us to live stream like we are today.
And it's also not, I don't want to interrupt you, but it's also not just, the big telecom companies. They're vital and important, obviously. But when you look at the sector, and you look at the firms that populate the sector, again, small businesses are a big part. 83%, again, less than 20 workers, and you get up to, I think, 94 or 95% less than 100 workers. So that's a great small business story on both ends again, right? As consumers of telecommunication services, but also on the provider end as well.
So what can, I guess, what can the government do? Is it just step out of the way, get out of the way and let private sector do their thing? But what can be done to help better provide opportunities in these areas for small businesses? And how can small businesses position themselves to be ready to benefit from a renewed focus on things like energy and infrastructure?
Yeah, it usually is get out of the way and let the private sector work. Now, in some areas, for example, with infrastructure in terms of roads and highways, the government's going to be involved in some way, whether they're doing it themselves or contracting it out, as I said, private sector options. Also, the waterways. The question then, as everybody says, when you start looking at these infrastructure projects, how do you pay for it, right?
Yeah.
So to the extent that, this is the Economist coming out at me, the extent that you can do it via some sort of user fees, the people that use it pay for it. That makes the most sense from an economic standpoint. The ability to bring in the private sector and private sector incentives as much as you can. Another infrastructure issue is air traffic control. We heard about that with the FAA and the president's proposal for a privatization effort there. Again, if that's structured properly, that could be a tremendous benefit in the sense that providing the incentives to really upgrade the system and modernize it. And that has obviously all sorts of benefits to the airline industry, but to travelers, to business travelers, to families, etc. So again, that's another area that people, I think, don't traditionally think of as infrastructure, but clearly that was the emphasis of the White House, and correctly so. So I think the bottom line here for small businesses that are looking at these sectors, that are in those sectors, so much of it rides on this shift in policy that we're talking about in a whole host of areas. Right? I mentioned, it's moving already on telecommunications. Chairman Ajit Pai is doing the right thing. So if you're in that sector, I think there's probably a degree of confidence, a high degree of confidence that things are moving in the right direction. Some of the other areas, it's going to take time. You and I were talking off screen. We're still waiting on tax reform and pushing, and I certainly expect it to happen. But obviously, some people are frustrated. When is it going to happen?
Sure.
I think the same question goes for the infrastructure issues that we're talking about. We've got some plans out there, but it's going to take some time to implement. So that's a question. That's a situation where business owners have to be keeping an eye on those regulatory changes, regulatory policy changes, I should say, overall, and make sure they're comfortable that things are going to happen the way they want it to happen. And then, they can make their decisions accordingly. Obviously, they can become members of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council because we're keeping an eye on this stuff.
Yeah.
But those, sometimes you have to do that, and I know a lot of business owners, they have their days are jam packed, but I think this time you have to keep an eye on things and make sure they're just still moving in the right direction. And I certainly expect that they will. I think just it's a matter of how long these things are going to take. I mean, we're dealing with quite frankly, we're dealing with a lot of big issues. Healthcare, tax reform, regulatory issues, infrastructure. There's a lot going on, so it's taking some time.
And I think you make a good point there, Ray, that oftentimes, in DC, amongst the policymakers, they look at the issues in silos because they're focusing on things individually. But for a business owner, all of these issues are intertwined. Issues like healthcare and tax will play into the decision of a business owner to take on a growth opportunity, because they're looking at the big picture here. Like, if I take this leap and go down this path of this growth opportunity, what's the impact going to be on my taxes? What's the additional cost going to be on my labor, on my healthcare? So all of these things for a small business owner is heavily intertwined. So to be successful, or to, I think, garner some growth in both energy and infrastructure, and have a small business focus providing opportunities to them, there is a necessity to really address some of those core issues of healthcare and tax.
You hit the nail on the head. Washington is very, you said silos. You're absolutely right. But business owners understand that, well, they have to deal with all of it, right? And so you're absolutely right. There could be opportunities. This is what this is what makes the energy investment and advancements over the last 10 plus years really amazing. Because when you look at all those other things that were in the mix, right? Healthcare reform moving in the wrong direction. Taxes were increased, both under Obamacare and in 2013. You can go to the EPA was not friendly toward carbon-based energy, right? Yeah. So that's amazing what entrepreneurs and businesses and investors were able to accomplish in the energy sector. But you can't just assume that that's going to be the case. I would argue, imagine what would have been accomplished if we had a rational tax and regulatory, or, if you want to say, my goodness, a pro-business, right, agenda during that period, and how much more we would have been able to do even in the energy sector. So you're absolutely right. It's for business owners, they're looking at the entire picture here. And it's not a silo situation, and you have to really work. This is, what we do in terms of getting our elected officials to fully understand that you have to look at everything that's going on across the board. I'm going on a little bit, but when you talk about regulation, right, and you hear somebody say, well, this regulatory cost is only, equal to this. Well, we can debate whether you're right or not, But then let's remember that comes on top of everything else that has come before that small business owners have to deal with. So you have to really look at the big picture if you're an elected official, and that's what we try to do, is try to get them to look at the big small business picture. How's that?
Yeah. So in closing, Ray, you mentioned telecom and you mentioned natural gas, but are there any other specific components in both the energy and infrastructure sectors that small businesses should be keeping their eye on that you think is poised for significant growth?
Yeah, I think, well, on the shale front, there seems to, that's, you talk about a resilient bunch there. And we keep hearing predictions that, well, if the price of natural gas falls to this level or oil falls to that level, that, they're going to shut these things down, no more investments coming. And they just keep pushing ahead and essentially lowering the costs with investment and technological advancement. It's a wonderful private sector story. So I think there are real opportunities there. I think there are things going on offshore as well in terms of oil production, some advancements there that present tremendous opportunities. So I think, again, the energy sector is still very exciting, even on the renewable end of things. We certainly wouldn't advocate the subsidies and things like that have largely helped that industry along. But there clearly are advancements going on that, as long as, taxpayers aren't on the hook, if you will,
sure.
That wouldn't that be great? I mean, if you actually make cost-effective, solar energy, that's fantastic. So that's the wonders of entrepreneurship is, there's somebody out there working on these issues, and it's going to come to market and change things dramatically. And we saw it. We've already seen it in energy, and there's certainly more coming in that sector. So I think it's very exciting. And I would say the same thing about telecommunications, especially now where we see a clear path back to a more rational regulatory scheme. So I think there's some tremendous opportunities on that front as well.
Well, and that's why it's so important that small businesses are engaged in part of the conversation in these two sectors, because so much of the innovation is driven by entrepreneurs and small businesses, and it's what's helping costs go down, energy costs go down, and I think what will really help us modernize our infrastructure, whether it be airports, roads, telecom, and so small businesses are an important part of that conversation and need to be at the table when opportunities begin to flow on that front. But thank you so much, Ray, for speaking with us about this. I think there's a lot more to come as we're working through trying to kind of move the ship of our economy to help spur up some growth. I want to encourage everyone to visit sbecouncil.org and take a look at the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. We have a lot of information on our website. Sign up for our e-news, which you can receive every week, and stay up to date with what's going on Capitol Hill and what growth opportunities might be coming down the pike for your business. Consider joining if you're a small business owner and becoming part of our community. And if you have any suggestions on policy issues that are really impacting your business or other small businesses in your community, and you have actual solutions you think can benefit, we'd love to hear more about that. We take a lot of our members' feedback and we share it directly with policymakers so that they have some recommendations on how to solve some of these big problems. Also follow us on Twitter at SB Council and on Facebook. And we host Small Business Insider Live every week on Thursdays, so keep an eye out for our next edition. Ray, thank you again so much for all your insight.
Thanks, Christy. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.